This episode of Earl Grey is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org.
You're listening to Trek FM.
Tea Earl Grey hot.
Welcome, listeners, to another cup of Earl Grey, Trek FM's dedicated podcast to the next generation. I'm your host, Amy Nelson. Now, Richard is gone this week, but we still have our wonderful Justin. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So what's Richard doing? He's off climbing a mountain again, something like that?
Probably. You know, he's got Star Trek 5 on the brain, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, great to be here talking more Next Generation. I know I say it every week, but I love talking the Next Generation with you every week.
I know. It's so fun. And I know. I love it too. Well, we have some listener feedback from the Babel Conference, and this is from Earl Grey 230. That's our favorite character moments, season 5. Justin, start us off.
Christopher Lutz says, great discussion. Some really fun picks I didn't expect. One I'd pick would be Data/Spock, actually, from Unification Part 2 when Data asks Spock if he misses his humanity. It's a great scene that's perfectly written. Data looks to Spock as a role model and kindred spirit in that moment, and Spock is reminded of how he has never truly forgotten his human half. Great stuff. That's definitely a great pick, and for me, seeing the two of them together is like a dream come true because Spock's my favorite original series character, Data's my favorite Next Generation character, so seeing them interact in the discussion they have, it's a wonderful moment. I love it.
It is. And they're, Data is the Spock of TNG. So it's great to have them on screen together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Eric Reese says, Amy, I'm very much in agreement with your understanding of Troy's intended purpose on the Enterprise. She's meant to be the ship's counselor in context of ship's council more than ship's therapist, which is why she has a place on the bridge besides the captain. Yes, I just love it when you listeners agree with me. Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah, and when you first mentioned that, it may have been, I don't know, last year or something, I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. That kind of makes sense. So,
yeah, it helps you to appreciate her position on the bridge a little bit more. So, good. Well, we also have some feedback from episode 231. That was our Father's Day special. Justin?
Yeah, Tim Hand said, another great episode from Earl Grey. I have some honorable mentions to add to the end list. Though not purely fathers in the accepted sense due to they were both illusions, one would be Captain Riker as father to young Jean-Luc in the episode Future Imperfect. It gave Riker an insight to what kind of a father he would possibly be, but for the 15-year illusion he had to overcome with the isolated alien child. And Picard himself being a father in the memorable episode The Inner Light. Even though it was actually a projected memory from the alien probe the Enterprise encounters, the 30 years of memories he experienced ultimately changed Picard's outlook how he viewed children from being terribly uncomfortable around them when TNG first began. Wow, Tim, I mean, those are great things. I don't think we'd even put it on our list because it's really illusory in a way, but Riker does experience that in Future Imperfect, and maybe it affects what would happen if he was a father, and for Picard, maybe that influences how he would be as a father with that experience in the Inner Light. But yeah, great picks that I don't think we had thought of, right?
Yeah, and I was also thinking Picard, like in Generations when he was in the Nexus, and he's having those children, there he is in the Nexus having children, so that's another illusional experience, I guess.
Well, and I like to think because they both have children in the novels that it helps to prepare Riker and Picard. So,
Yeah. Stefan Ringline says, great discussion. Enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for sharing your personal experiences of being father, Richard, and son, Justin. I could definitely relate to the son experience. Also, Go Madrid. Wow, didn't see that one coming. Deep thoughts there. Well, thank you so much. It was good to, Richard and Justin really shared some experiences of being father and son.
you make it sound like Richard's my father.
Well, no, I mean, respectively.
Respectively, yeah. No, like, thank you, Stefan. I mean, I think as we said, it can be hard to share these things, but I'm glad we could. Of course, not trying to speak on Richard's behalf because he's not here, but like just from my perspective, it was a little difficult, but I'm glad I could do that and that you related to that experience. And also that you were taken by surprise that we talked about Gul Madred. I was hoping we'd take some people by surprise because you don't usually think of him as like a father figure to talk about because he's not part of Starfleet or anything like that. But yeah, so glad you enjoyed it.
So listeners, we have an email that we would like to read to you. And I think, Justin, you have that. It's from Randy Congdon.
I do. So this is from Randy Congdon from Nevada. And he says, in reference to your recent podcast on the episode The Wounded. I was watching the last season of DS9 around the time that your podcast aired. In the season finale, I noticed that the minstrel boy was played during O'Brien's send-off scene while he's cleaning out his quarters and finds the missing Alamo soldier. I thought this was an especially poignant goodbye scene. Obviously, the moments from The Wounded that pertain to this song, Miles, and Maxwell clearly had a lasting impact on the writers. Yeah, thank you, Randy. And that is a really nice touch that they put into the last episode of DS9 where the minstrel boy is playing when O'Brien's saying goodbye to his quarters. So, yeah, I mean, and that makes you think, of course, of The Wounded from TNG, so it's a nice little through line there. So, yeah, thank you for your email and mentioning that. Yeah,
it really adds to Miles' continuity through both series. It's really nice.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, listeners, we are so honored to have a very special guest with us today. It is Bruce Gibson, host of Literary Treks. Bruce, welcome to Earl Grey. It's been a while.
It has been a while, and I just want to point out something. My name, Bruce, is actually my middle name.
Oh.
So I go by my middle name. My first name is Richard, so you still have Richard on the show.
Oh my gosh, who knew?
All right, Richard Gibson, right, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Wait, that's my dad. That sounds weird.
Yeah, I think, Bruce, the last time you were on was when we were talking about our experience at Star Trek Las Vegas, right? Back in August.
Yes, and we get to experience that again in just a couple of months. Less than a couple months.
Yeah, well,
about a month.
As we're recording this, about 6 weeks until STLV, and we'll have a future episode where we'll talk a little bit about that. If listeners are looking to prepare, we'll share some stories of our experience at Star Trek Las Vegas, me and Amy. And I'll be there.
Oh boy, could I tell you stories about Amy?
Now.
My gosh.
So yeah, just a little thing to say, like if listeners are going to STLV and they see us there, make sure you say hi.
Absolutely.
But that's not what we're talking about today.
No, it's not. No. So excited. Bruce came up and wanted to talk about Kalar, and such an amazing character. I'm so excited to get in. So, Bruce, what was the inspiration for wanting to talk about Kalar?
Well, because you haven't talked about Kalar before.
That's true.
Not in detail. So, I don't know. I think with her character, she's only in 2 episodes of TNG, but yet she makes a big presence. People seem to remember her. She's a character that really stands out from just being in 2 episodes, and she's definitely one that needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. Justin, what do you think about Kalar?
I think Kalar is a fantastic character, and of course she's played by the amazing Susie Plaxton, who also played the Vulcan Dr. Solar on an earlier episode of The Next Generation. She also ends up playing the female Q on Voyager. She plays the Andorian Tara on Enterprise. I may have even forgotten one she played, but just like such a variety of different characters from different alien races and kinds of beings. So I think part of it's that, but I think the character is pretty fascinating because here's this half Klingon, half human character, and we've seen half human characters before, like Spock, but I think this was the first time we saw like half Klingon, half human, and of course, Klingons and humans were enemies in the original series, and you see Worf, and it seems like okay, there's some kind of peace going on before you get that confirmed in Star Trek VI, but just like. I'm sure we'll talk about it more, the conflict between those two cultures. What does it mean to be half Klingon and half human? She's just such a fascinating character, and I think you're right, Bruce. Even though she's in 2 episodes, she has a very outsized impact and is a fan favorite and one that people think about a lot, and I just love the performance and the character and wish we would have seen quite a bit more.
Yeah, Kalar definitely has a lasting impact through the seasons and in TNG. And I remember seeing her last year at STLV in the vendor's room and just walking past her. It's like every time I walked past, she wasn't at her table. And then I finally saw her. Remember, we asked for an interview, and she is just, she's radiant. She is so gorgeous, and she's got beautiful long hair and just a dynamic personality. And when she talks, it's like, she just draws you in, and just what an amazing actress. And she does such a good job portraying Kalar. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the way that she plays off of Worf. I mean, that's one of my favorite things. When I watch the 2 episodes that she's in, for some reason, I'm always laughing at Worf. Just his reactions to her.
Because she's trying to push him and needle him, right? And make him laugh or something.
Oh my gosh, there are so many times when they have to go in to analyze different options, and she's like, she was late. Sorry, I had to make myself beautiful. You're not even going to look? I am familiar with your looks, and it's just so funny. There are so many that I wrote down. I was just like, oh my gosh, yeah, the interplay between those two is perfect, and it's so, so good.
Well, not even when she's teasing him, but even when they start getting a little intimate, just to see, Worf show his teeth and just start laughing every time.
You're laughing at their foreplay?
I am, because I've tried it and it doesn't work.
I didn't know we would get that kind of information on this episode.
The visual image, make it go away.
It's not just that. They do this hand sniffing thing where they sniff the wrist and all that.
Their
what is up
olfactory sensories must be, more advanced than
trying to
ours.
load themselves up with more pheromones to get it go. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a genius concept for them, because it makes the culture different from what we do. We don't smell each other's hands in those situations.
Not usually.
Well, I can't speak for Justin, but I don't. But I just think it's really odd, and I love that idea, like you're saying, the pheromones. But at the same time, it's kind of awkward to watch that, And they're and I kept thinking about the actors. As they're being told, okay, so in this scene, what I want you to do is hold her hand and start smelling it. And then she smell your hand.
Yeah.
And they're probably like, what? Like this? No, like that. And somebody's had to show them how to do it.
Yeah. Well, let's first wanted to talk about her service in Starfleet. So when we first meet her in the Emissary, she is known as Special Emissary. And or she's also called the Envoy, which I don't know.
Yeah, and then Ambassador in Reunion, so it's a little bit different.
Well, so I'm thinking she was promoted, right? She starts as Special Emissary, and then through the years with her excellent service, by the next time we see her, she is Ambassador Kalar in Reunion.
Does that mean, though, as Special Emissary, that she is part of the Ambassador Corps or whatever that division is called, and it's just like a step up to be Ambassador? I mean, have you thought about these things, Bruce, like what she's called?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I took it that what Amy's saying. I just assumed in the second episode we see her in Reunion that she's been promoted. She's in a higher position because she seems to appear and no one's expecting her. And she makes her grand entrance. And so, I don't think Worf is even expecting her
Either time.
to come on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can we talk about her dedication to her job? I mean, when we see her and meet her in Emissary, she is in a probe that has been modified to fit her sort of like a captain. Like, that is serious dedication. It has a purpose, and she is going to go to all lengths to be successful with her mission. Like, that is amazing to travel warp 9, right?
Yeah.
In this, I mean,
And this
anything
thing that
could
barely
hit
fits
it.
her. Yeah.
I'm like,
I mean, does it have shields even? Like,
yeah, I mean, so many ways to die in space, as
Yeah.
Bones would say. Like, this is one way.
yeah, like I think about that too. Like, wow, that like for someone to tell her, okay, this is so important and so crucial. We're going to cut off 6 hours off your journey by sticking you in this thing that we usually put photon torpedoes in. I think what it is. Or, well, no, it's a probe. I'm getting it confused because
it's a
actually they redressed the what was it? The photon torpedo that held Spock in Star Trek 3, 2 and 3, I guess. 2 and 3.
Yeah.
In order to be this probe. So that's why I'm thinking of it as a photon torpedo. But anyway, it's supposed to be like a probe. And like, wow, like that's really something because the way that I see Kalar is, sure, she's half human and half Klingon. She has this sense of humor and all these things that we don't necessarily as much associate with Klingons. But she is still fearless and fierce, and she's just going to do what's needed, and no problem, I'll do that for you, right?
Yeah. It just seemed like a device just to make her grand entrance surprise.
It was a very grand entrance because, like, at first, when I first saw this episode and I didn't know anything about it, I was like, "Wow, what is happening?" And they're spending time with this probe, and they're showing this exterior shot, like the
wasn't
tractor
that
beam's
beautiful?
getting it, and they're beaming it on. Who's in
Yeah.
it? What's going on? It is a real grand, memorable entrance, right?
At least she doesn't jump out, surprise, like that. But it's great too, because then, again, Worf's reaction, obviously, they know each other. There's a past. And that's one of the great things when you introduce a character into an episode. The character typically is going to be more interesting if you find out there's a past, because there's some relationship that's already established as opposed to creating a new relationship. So you're already going in and wondering, okay, what is this relationship that she's had with Worf? Why does Worf know her, and where does she come from, and how did they know each other? And so you're already starting things off with a peak interest of, okay, she's half Klingon, half human, but at the same time, what is this past that she has? And so you're already intrigued into the character.
I have a question for you, Bruce. So, like, are there places in the novels where you see Worf and Kalar at an earlier period?
There is a young reader Starfleet Academy novel where they're cadets together, or she's like an emissary to cadets at the academy, and I haven't read it, but I'm just somewhat familiar with it.
Okay.
But I think that's about it that I'm aware of.
So according to that, they met while he was at Starfleet Academy.
Yes.
So these Klingon ships, the Tong, is in cryogenic sleep, and they have to, get there hopefully before they wake up, because the Klingon ship still believes that they're at war with the Federation. And she is so fatalistic in her philosophy that we need to destroy them. There's not going to be any other option. And she just seems so narrow-minded. And, Captain Picard's like, well, we're going to find another way. Well, there isn't another way, because they're going to want to kill you. And so you need to destroy them. And I just find that so bizarre. Like, here we see her as this dedicated officer going in this probe to do this mission, and then she's got her mind set in one way that they just need to be destroyed, period. Like, to me, there was a little disjunct with what I sort of think of her. Like, I would imagine, if you are an emissary, that you're going to look for options and try diplomacy where she doesn't want to at the beginning.
Yeah, it is. It does seem like she's especially hostile in that situation. But also, I think at one point she says, these are Klingons of those era that think they're at war with the Federation. All you can do is destroy them. And maybe she thinks differently about more modern day Klingons. But yeah, if she's this emissary that's part of like the diplomatic corps, you would think that. But it's almost like she's had some kind of experience with her Klingon side that really soured her on that we don't know about. That's what I always think.
Yeah, there's that, and I do think that, but I also it's that struggle of being a Klingon and a human, and I think she knows that these are a Klingon. These are Klingons, of course, from a different time, and so she knows. Okay, first of all, they're Klingon. I get them. I'm half of that. I know what that's like. And so you're going to go in there and tell them, oh, things have changed and there's all these niceties between the Federation and the Klingons, and they're not going to believe you. They're going to kill you. And so it's either you kill them or they kill you. Now, yeah, that doesn't sound very Federation Starfleet like, but at the same time, she's like, they would probably prefer to be killed with honor than to be told, now you just need to be nice to all the Federation people from here on out. You know, it's a century later, and I think she knows that they're not going to respond well to that they would probably prefer to die with honor in battle. And so let's give them what they want, and then we take the threat away.
I find it especially interesting, though, because like has this hostility and like you're going to have to destroy them if they wake up. But at the same time, she has like this fascination or this on again, off again thing with Worf. You know, it almost feels a bit like it's in conflict that she can, you know, really have this affection or fall in love with Worf, and toward a lot of other Klingons, it's like they're killers. That's all there is to it.
Well, because I think she looks at Worf as not being in the true sense Klingon. Like, I think most of the Klingons that she deals with are these more warrior types. And I'm not saying that she's against all Klingons, but, you know, Worf was raised on Earth, so he's not quite like them.
But he thinks of himself as like the Klingons, Klingon and duty and honor and like all this stuff, right?
Yeah, but she probably looks at him and says, yeah, but I know who you really are.
Okay.
You know? And you're not quite like them. And it's not, and I think she does, you know, like Klingons, but there's a certain type of Klingon, and maybe it is that old-fashioned Klingon, and so she has that against this group of Klingons on the ship because they're from a different century. But then there's the old ways of doing things, and she always seems to talk about, like, you know, the Klingon way. Like, it's almost, she puts everything's in quotes. Like, and you just see her holding up her fingers like a quote, the Klingon way. And she knows Worf isn't quite that way, and he tries to be or whatever, but she knows he's not really fully into that society. He grew up on Earth, so he knows that there's other ways of doing things than just quote, right, the Klingon way.
Well, and of course the irony is in Reunion, where, you know, they're trying to figure out who will succeed to being Chancellor, that she's the one that mentions something in these old ways that gives Picard what he wants in order to kind of stretch things out and see what's going on. So it actually works to her advantage later.
Yeah, and I often wonder why she is so against the Klingon way of doing things. I mean, she always seems to talk with disdain about Klingons, and oh yeah, and then the Klingons, guess what? They do it this way and they do it that way. I mean, she almost sounds, you know, that she very much favors her human side and tries to distance herself from her Klingon side.
It sounds like she must have gotten along with her human mother a lot more than her Klingon father. That's all I can think of.
Well, that is a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk about that next. How, she has a father who is Klingon and a mother who is human. And I love the scene, of course, Troy's in it, where Troy is walking K'Ehleyr to her quarters, and, you know, and she's like, oh, well, I'm a half-blood, if you will, as well, where with Troy, it's her father that was human and mother who is Beta Z. And, you know, and you can see that K'Ehleyr feels that she's just trapped between these two worlds. And, you know, Troy says, well, I like to believe that, you know, I have the richness and diversity of two worlds. And then K'Ehleyr's like, well, it sounds like you have the best of both of those worlds, where I've got the worst. And yeah, she just seems to think that she's inherited the worst traits and characteristics from each of these worlds, you know, the Klingon and the human, like her humor, you know, she is, you know, sort of downplays her humor and how it gets her into trouble. And then this Klingon and all this fight and this anger that she feels because of the Klingon side. And so she's, I think, viewing that she's got the worst of both of these species.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting when you think about it, because when I was thinking about it at this time, there is that conversation that she has with Deanna, who's half Betazoid, and who seems to have gotten like good things from both, even if she's annoyed by her mother sometimes, right? She seems to appreciate that. But for Kalar, it's like it's been. She feels like her Klingon side has been a curse. It's just given her a temper and all of that. But I think you see in the course of the episodes that Klingon side also gives her like strength and fierceness and a certain determination that she really uses well. But she's really uncomfortable with it. And it made me also think of some of the other half-human characters we see in Star Trek, which I think would be like Spock and B'Elanna Torres. And like for Spock, he's very much like, my Vulcan side is what I really identify with, and this human side is the one that's really trying to push me so much. So he has kind of a similar conflict where he relates to one side and is kind of pushing the other one aside. And for B'Elanna, I mean, I think of B'Elanna Torres on Voyager as kind of a bit of an outgrowth of the Kalar character, where, I mean, for B'Elanna too, like, it gives her this temper that she's Klingon, and there's certain things she really doesn't like about it. But for her, at the same time, for B'Elanna, she had all these problems with her human father, and like she feels pretty caught between those worlds. I mean, it seems like out of all of them, like Deanna is the most getting the most from both and the most well adjusted. But like it feels like that's a struggle you see in different parts of Star Trek, where there are these two different cultures, these two different ways of being. You may relate more to one side or the other side. And I mean, that can, happen in our contemporary culture on Earth, when you have parents that come from different backgrounds, and there can be a conflict between traditions and religion and how you do things, and like, how do you navigate that, and how do you think about it? Like, my parents had some different backgrounds, and I found it actually hard to relate to either one, and so I kind of forged my own path. And it seems like Kalar is in some ways trying to forge her own path, but she's a little unsure about where to go, because there's this Klingon side that she really has issues with, but she says her human side gets her in trouble too, when she has this sense of humor that sometimes can get at people that she's working with, right? So I find it a fascinating kind of conflict within herself that you see.
Yeah, the whole thing sounds a little odd to me. The whole, human side, Vulcan side for Spock, and for Kalar, the Klingon and human side. It sounds so much in these characters that they have to pick a side.
Right.
And it's like, if you're coming from two different cultures, but see,
except for Troy, I don't think she necessarily picks a side.
Troy doesn't. Troy's actually very well balanced, and versus these other two. And I mean, I can't relate because I don't really have, parents from two different religions or from different backgrounds and such. But typically when you're raised in a family where two people come from different sides of things, they kind of pick their own side. The family picks the side, and you're raised in that manner. But even if you diverge away from that, and so let's just say, you have somebody who is Catholic marries somebody who is Jewish, and so
that was actually the case for my parents.
Okay, There you go. So sometimes they'll still practice their religion, or one will favor more the one other religion,
right,
or vice versa.
Or in my case, they aren't really into either one.
Yeah,
or that. But there's a common thread. There's a common setup in the family now, and so like you said, I'm not even interested in the direction my parents are. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you find your path, as you said, Justin, but I don't feel as if you're going to reject the other path, the other side of you. It's not like, let's say, okay, your one parent is Catholic, the other one's Jewish, and let's say you go and you're going down the Jewish path, but you don't go, those Catholics, and if I could just distance myself from being raised from a parent that was Catholic. I mean, that just seems really extreme to me. And I feel like that's just, part of the whole writing of drama and trying to do something in the TV show. But in a lot of ways, I don't feel like if you're really mature and you've grown up at this age, that you really wouldn't have an attitude against that unless something bad had happened to you. So it just leads me to believe that if her father was Klingon and she has this disdain for Klingons, well, therefore there was something that happened with her father, between her and her father, where it's really not that she has a problem with Klingons. She has more of a problem with her father.
Yeah, and I really want to know what that is. I'm guessing that isn't something that's been addressed in novels anywhere, Bruce, that you know of. No,
not that I'm aware of.
Because what happened? Like we don't even know her father's name. So we don't even know who he is, what he did, what happened. But she has all this hostility from something in the past.
Yeah, to the point that she's so Klingons, and her father was a Klingon, but then she's attracted to Worf, who was raised by parents from Earth. So he was raised more in an environment that she would prefer to raise now her son in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. Did she say that her father died? Or
I don't think she said anything
up?
About that. She just said at one point her father's Klingon when she's talking to Troy, and her mother's is human.
Yeah, and they just mentioned that the DNA is compatible.
Right, so, with some work, apparently. But yeah, no, we don't know if they're still alive or what. I mean, that's the thing. Since you only see Kalar for 2 episodes, there's so much we don't know about her, but I'm so fascinated by the character. I wanted to see more. We talked about this before on Earl Grey, what, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, later in the episode. What would have happened if instead of Kalar dying, she had just kind of moved into the Enterprise with Worf and Alexander, and we would have gotten to see more of her, kind of more of what we get to see more of Keiko and know more about her and all that stuff. That kind of situation would have been really fascinating, but I don't know if you could have done that in the context of what TNG was doing.
Well, I know. And I wanted to see, as I was watching the Emissary, I'm at the end, where Worf is starting to take the oath and she storms out. And I'm like, man, what would it have been if they ended up taking the oath together? What would that have looked like? I think she's such a realist. And, she's like, what are we in Reunion? She's like, well, what would we have done if we did take the oath? I would have had to have given up, my career or you, and what would we have done? And, she's such a realist. But I would have liked to have seen
I think it might have changed Worf in interesting ways if she was there as a continuing presence in his life, because she is one of those few people, probably Jadzia is another one of them, that kind of pushes Worf come on, are you really this, Klingon duty and honor iceberg, or is there more there beneath the surface, And she could have pushed him in a really interesting way. And I think they, if they had wanted to, they could have written it in such a way that she accepts some kind of ambassadorial type of position on the Enterprise, so that when they're making first contact or whatever, she can be there as an ambassadorial representative. I mean, there could have been some way, but I don't think when things were more episodic that they necessarily would have been able to do it that way,
Oh, but they decided to have Keiko with O'Brien.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I mean, also Keiko was somebody who was introduced pretty much just as, O'Brien's marrying someone and it's Keiko, whereas Kalar is introduced as she's a special emissary on this mission, and it's not just for the purpose of being with Worf, and they could have kind of folded in there. But I see what you mean. Maybe they could have done something and had her there every once in a while, but for whatever reason, they just... Well, we'll get into it. I think there's a specific
you
reason
guys are doing great leading this show, because I did want to talk about
it's almost like we have some kind of outline for the show.
It is. So, yeah, the relationship with Worf. I mean, this, totally combative, on again, off again. We know that they were on again 6 years ago, previous to, we see TNG starting. And there's that one comment where it's we didn't even try, and so they didn't have the courage or, careers or whatever, they didn't even give it a go. And so now we see them here, and again, they're not giving it a go. They want to take the oath and she doesn't. And then with Reunion, now there's a kid. And again, they're going to take the oath. And then no. Then Worf, pulls back. So
My
it's this
dishonor.
total on again, off again relationship. So Bruce, what do you think about this relationship with Kayla and Worf?
Sounds like some of my previous relationships. Except we'd never smelled hands.
Yeah.
Or like fought monsters in a holodeck, probably.
Or done that either. Right. I like the on again, off again, because again, I feel as if it's more of Kaylar's struggle than it is Worf's. Worf is very much open to, okay, let's bond and let's
in the
be
emissary,
together.
but he in Reunion he's like, no, I have this discommendation, let's not do it. But in the emissary, it seems like, yep, let's go ahead. And she's like, whoa.
But I don't think but his reason in Reunion is not because he doesn't want to, it's because he's trying to protect her. He doesn't want to bring her down into the mess that he's in right
Which she
now.
doesn't care about.
Which she doesn't care about, but he does.
But see, that's the thing that like in Emissary, like she doesn't, because the only reason he's going to take the oath is because of this code. Because it's
Apparently
the
the
Klingon
code
thing
says
to
sleep
do.
together,
It's not
get married.
because he wants to. And so I think she's smart for calling him out on that.
Well, she's calling him out on it, and she's ticked off that he even would do this because, again, that's that old Klingon way. And I have a feeling that she's like, okay, you're doing that same thing that my father did to my mother. And they probably weren't even happy together. And she's mad about that. And she's like, I thought you were different than this, Worf. You weren't raised on Klingon or Cronus or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Think about the novels.
the Kling.
Yeah.
But you weren't raised that way. And so now you're doing the Klingon thing. Come on, dude. I thought you were somebody different than that. You know what? You're just like my dad. I'm out of here. Goodbye. And then she leaves and she thinks about it and she's like, I'm just letting things get to me. When I get back there, if I ever see him again, I'll tell him I feel differently. And then he's like, now you don't want to have anything to do with me because I'll just, bring a bad name to you because, whatever.
Dishonor for 7 generations.
Dishonor.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to do that to you, nor do I want to do that to that kid who I think may be my son.
Well, and I think like so many times she wants Worf to communicate with her, like just talk to me. She says that a couple different times. And because that's where we're going to learn the true feelings and not just be guessing. Oh, well, maybe he likes me. Maybe he doesn't. Like that's Worf is so frustrating because he's refusing to talk. And then he's going to take this marriage where no. And I think it's pretty groundbreaking in, the late 80s to have this sex isn't equal to marriage idea on the show where it's like, oh, well, we had sex. Well, now we must get married. And it's like, whoa. No, that's not the case. And unless you have real feelings for me, that's a different scenario. But we're not going to get married just because we had sex.
Just a bit of a side note. Like, do you think that when people are in the holodeck and like it's getting intimate, they're going to have sex, they have like a lock so nobody can come in? Like, because it seems like anybody can come into holodeck programs in progress on Next Generation.
Apparently, because Worf just walked right in.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Those are in different novels. They address that.
Okay.
No, actually, no. What the holodeck does, it creates a holodeck sock that goes over the door and so people know not to come in.
Oh my gosh. There's no doorknob, though.
That's true.
But anyway,
There's no doorknob.
Sorry to take it on a side little tangent, but I always think about that like, ooh, okay. Hopefully nobody's trying to get in.
I have too. And not just about, having that kind of relation on the holodeck, but anything that starts to happen that might be a bit embarrassing.
I think Quark's holosuite has like a permanent lock on it whenever someone's in there. Oh. Because that's pretty much what's going on in there.
Well, I mean, think what happened, with Barclay. They walked in on him and, it wasn't a sexual thing, but it's just, it's kind of odd that if you're in a holodeck, anybody can just walk in. You would almost think it would be like a doorbell that says, ding dong, Riker wants to come in.
Yeah, or that you would need some kind of security override or, some kind of emergency protocol to enter without permission.
Yeah. But anyway, what was your question? I forgot.
Okay, so my original is, don't you think it's pretty groundbreaking in the 80s to have this idea that sex doesn't equal marriage and this, oh, we can have sex and not get married idea?
I think some of that had been broken down, and especially like in the late 60s or into the 70s and 80s. I mean, maybe in some ways and in some circles, but I don't know. What's your impression of that, Bruce?
For a show like this, so in the 80s, I do remember there were shows where people would have sex and not get married, because I remember at the same time shows like LA Law was on, and that was happening all the time. But that was one of these shows that's on at 10 o'clock, and it's in the later time slot, where this is a syndicated show that's on mostly on weekends in the afternoon or early evening. And so typically in those time slots, and they would try to avoid that or be a little more careful with that than they would with some of the more adult skewing later in the evening shows. But I don't think it's quite unusual. And the fact that it's also Klingons and a holodeck, I think, it wasn't as direct, I think.
Well, and I think it's awesome that it's the female saying, no, we're not going to get married. Like that sort of breaks social norms as well. Because wouldn't you say, back then, usually it's the girl wanting to get married, and now she's the one that's like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, basically, maybe we don't think about it because it's not like what we think about, like someone on their knee proposing marriage. But basically, Worf is proposing marriage to Kalar, right?
Yeah,
and
he's
that
like
is a
standing
reversal.
up and shouting the words.
And I mean, that's a reversal even to how things, I think, are still mostly done in our own day and age, where it's, yeah. So it is interesting to think of it in that way. And it's not like he's asking, he's just like, I'm going to take the oath now.
Right. It's that duty. That's what you do. And I can understand her not wanting to do that, because it's like, are you doing that because you have feelings for me? Or are you doing it because, well, that's just how you're supposed to do it after this? I mean, come on.
Right. And so I applaud her for, wanting to do the right thing at the right time, because they mentioned 6 years ago, they both weren't ready. And now she feels like, oh, you're only doing it out of obligation, so I think she's, I don't know. I think as far as relationship goes, I think she's more mature about it than Worf is, if I were to be so bold.
She's thinking about it maybe a little more deeply, whereas for him, it's almost like a reflex, like, oh, now it's time to do this. Although I do think that you see that he does really care for her. And at the end of the episode, he says, I will not be complete without you. I think he does love her, but it's also somehow tangled up in this Klingon tradition thing, so that, it's not, I don't think it's 100% the love. Part of it is like, we have to do this, but I think he does love her at the same time. It's kind of complicated the way it seems like he thinks about it.
Well, and then we see in Reunion that I feel finally it's like, they finally profess their love for each other and say that, yes, I am not, Kalar, sort of admits that, I'm not complete without you.
And one thing that I thought of that I hadn't thought of as much before is, in Reunion, Kalar is doing all of this digging to find out what happened with Worf's discommendation and what happened with Duras and all of that. And I found in watching it this time, like that happens, I think, right after she has a conversation with Worf where she's like, I'm not complete without you either. Mm-hmm. And it seems like the obstacle for them being together is Worf's discommendation. Right. So that is then motivating her to do all of this digging and to try to find out what's going on. So it's like she's decided in that episode, like, okay, I think I really want to be with Worf, but there's this barrier. What can I do to break down this barrier? Of course, she takes a huge risk and dies for it. But I hadn't really thought of it that much before, that's a lot of her motivation in digging around for that information.
Yeah, because if you're going to get married to someone and they have this issue and they're not going to tell you about it, she wants to know about it. I mean,
she wants to find out and help,
Yeah, she wants to find out bad. She goes to Picard. She's looking, in
which
Federation files, and then
that only makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you're like, okay, Worf won't tell me. Okay, let me just go ask somebody else. Hey, Captain Picard, What went on there? Oh,
Can't tell
I
you.
can't tell you.
She's like, oh boy, it's something really
okay.
juicy.
Yeah.
Now I really need to know, and it just escalates from there. I mean, it's like, do I really want to marry this guy if nobody can tell me what happened? I don't think
Yeah.
she questioned about marrying him, but it's like, yeah, she need to have.
Well, also, she
answers.
needs to find out because, like, there's probably a small part of her that's like, what if there really is something, terrible that Worf did or that his father did? I need to know about that.
No, I don't think
she
that's why
believes that
she's
at all?
looking. She's trying to remove the only obstacle that she sees Worf is having with them being together. Because she doesn't care. Like, discommodation, whatever.
Man,
like,
I
I
wish-
want to be with you, you want to be with me.
Right.
Oh, Worf, you see this as an obstacle. Well, let's get over this together. Let me see if I can do something to help.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think she's expecting to say, "Oh, Worf, I found out about it, and it's really not a big deal. Come on, let's just let this go." But instead,
Yeah.
she's finding out it's a bigger deal than what she thought it was.
And of course, she just needed to wait until early season 5 for his discommendation to be cleared. But
I know that's what's so frustrating. It's like, oh, I know that that kills me.
yeah, it does because they resolve it less than a season later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, talking about Kalar and her digging into this private happening there on Kronos. So she's digging in and finds that records are sealed by Doras, and then Doras gets wind of it and goes to pay her a visit. So we have the end of Kalar. And I'm glad that we didn't see it because when we do see her next, the place is covered in blood. I mean,
it must
I
have
don't know
been
what
terrible.
he did. Oh, Doc Crusher says she was stabbed multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad we didn't see that, but I'm just
Yeah.
always so heartbroken that she dies. And I think I'd put this in the outline so that we could talk about it because I think the first couple of times I watched the episode, I was like, it makes me so sad. I always cry when she dies, and then Worf kills Duras and all of that. And I didn't think about it too much until a couple of years ago, I think, when I was reading about this trope called fridging, which, if our listeners don't know, is basically when someone who's close to a hero is killed or in some way assaulted by a villain, which then causes that hero to go chase after the villain, possibly kill them or whatever. Oftentimes, like in the worst instances of this, it's that a female character is just there for the purpose of the hero, like chasing the villain or exacting some kind of vengeance. I don't think that's the case to that extreme with Kalar, where that's the only purpose she's there. She's a special emissary before, she's the ambassador, she's helping Picard with the Jajuk. There's all of these things that she's there for. It's not just solely for that purpose. But like when I was kind of taking a look at their motivation for this, Ronald D. Moore, who was one of the writers on the episode, actually had said at one point that it was Michael Pillar's idea to kill Kalar during the story break. And I'm quoting this from an AOL chat back when the writers were like chatting things in AOL. So he said it was Michael Pillar's idea to kill Kalar during the story break because it would be a great dramatic turn and would provide Worf with ample reason to go stick a batleth into Duras's guts, end quote. So clearly, like, the motivation, that's one person saying it was, but someone, Michael Pillar or someone else, said, like, we need to have Kalar get killed so that Worf has the motivation to kill Duras. And so I think it does, to a certain extent, fit into that trope, which can be quite unfortunate. And I don't think they necessarily had to kill Kalar in this instance. But now I think of that every time, like, she's killed just so that Worf can kill the other guy, which I think is really unfortunate and kind of takes down what they could have done with the character. Anyway, I just wanted to say a little bit about that and see what you guys thought.
That may be the case, but I also think that the character was so well done in the in season 2, The Emissary, that they probably were already thinking, we'd love to bring that character back sometime.
Yeah.
And now here we are into the 4th season, and let's bring the character back. But how many times are we going to just keep bringing the character back? And what are we going to do with her? And if she does come back and Worf wants to be with her, Is she just going to keep saying no throughout the episode, just like we've already done in the season 2 episode? Or, do we get them married? And then, like you were saying earlier, do we have her on the ship? Well, now she's going to be a prominent character. She's not just like they handled with, Miles O'Brien and, Miles O'Brien is getting married to this woman named Keiko. This is now a prominent character that was introduced in season 2. And you can't just put her in the background. So have her leave the ship and show up every couple seasons and I almost feel like they were like, let's do something with her, but let's give her a dramatic end, because we can't just show her off and then bring her back again and she leaves and comes back again. It's going to get too repetitive, and we'd love to have the character back at least for one more episode. So they gave her a death scene, maybe.
I can see that, although again, like, I would have loved it a lot more if she hadn't died and she had stayed on the ship for some reason, but they may have been limited in what they could do. I don't know. What do you think of all of this, Amy, and her death?
Yeah, when I saw your notes on fridging and you sent me that link and, where it came from the comic books, I believe it was Green Lantern and how
where a woman is like killed and literally like put in a fridge
the
hero to find. Yeah.
And so then that allows the hero to exact his vengeance, and then watching Reunion, and then when Worf, beams over to Duras's ship and I'm here to claim my vengeance. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so the trope. Now I'm going to think of it every time. But yeah, and I hear what you're saying too, Bruce, because Susie Plaxton is so dynamic and she can't be a Keiko. I'm sorry. She's too outstanding. She's had 2, major episodes where her character, has meaning and has purpose and, is working with the crew of the Federation. So I don't see her just going into the botanical gardens and, working her green thumb.
I think she would be more than botanical garden. They could find some, I don't know, post for her or something.
She's raising flowers, but they're only from Earth, not from Kronos.
So, and I've heard Susie Plaxton, at STLV say that she would have loved to have, continued working with the cast of TNG, so she was definitely willing. Well, obviously we see her as Dr. Solar, so she definitely wanted to. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen something different. I can see why the writers did it that way, but yeah, we could have seen more of Duras. I mean, we do throughout, his sisters and his son or make-believe son or whatever.
And his ancestor.
Yeah, so the Duras name lives on, but just not the actual Duras, so.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing, too, because he was this guy that was covering things up in Sins of the Father, and then they made the decision, like, let's off him. And now Gowron is the Chancellor and the important person. Like, okay. So it is a really interesting episode, Reunion, because, I mean, of course, we're focusing on Kalar. It's not just about her. It's about who's going to be Chancellor. And it introduces Gowron. It introduces the Batleth. It introduces the Vorcha-class ship. There's a lot of important stuff happening in this episode. And I can see why they might have made the decision, but I just really wanted to see more in what that would have been like, and I'm always sad to see her die.
Leave your audience wanting more. There you go.
Yes.
That's what they did.
A lot of Star Trek characters don't stay dead. Couldn't Kalar not have stayed dead somehow?
Right? Oh, yeah.
Well, and you could have even taken Kalar and made her a regular character on DS9, or make her the B'Elanna Torres character on Voyager if she had lived. You could have done, in these other series, you could have taken that character and put her in those settings too.
Or even like flashbacks through Alexander, I don't know.
Yeah. But
I think a lot of people would say they prefer to have Kalar there than Alexander.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there is a lot of people that would say that.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, and if you watch these 2 episodes back to back, it's also interesting how Worf, says to Captain Picard, can't you find somebody else to, watch her or escort her around. And he's like, Mr. Wolf, you need to get over this, And then in the next episode's the same thing. Captain Picard, can't you find somebody else? Mr. Wolf, you are a Starfleet officer. Do your job.
I withdraw my request.
I know. I love that. It's so good. Picard is so good.
Picard's the only one that gets Worf to withdraw his request, at least on TNG.
Yeah, but oh my gosh, Picard is so great because he can dress down Worf for what he did when he killed Duras and said, you're Starfleet. You have to make a decision: are you Starfleet or not? And you have to follow the rules. And after he dresses him down, he then takes one step forward, as if I'm stepping out of the Starfleet role now, and now I'm approaching you as a friend and an understanding. And it's like Picard can really balance those two things really well of, I'm your captain, but I'm also, I don't want to say friend, but I'm here to also support you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's there to be like a mentor for him is the way I think about it.
Yes.
Because, like Worf has these conflicts that sometimes come up, and it comes up in other parts of the series, like when he leaves in Redemption, he's like, I'm going to go off and fight in this war now. And I think that Picard has to kind of see and try to understand that, he wants to try to go along with what he sees as Klingon traditions and duty and what he wants to do, but at the same time balance it with being a Starfleet officer. And I think at different parts, Picard is kind of helping him to in that journey to be a better officer and to try to balance things with conflicts that may happen because of his culture. I think is really good at that.
Well, and even in Emissary, where the first time Worf is like, I don't want to help, get Data or Riker to do it. And Picard asks two questions. It's like, is it a personal reason? Yes, it is. Is it a professional reason? No, it isn't. And then it's like when Worf says those words out loud, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm being stupid. I'll withdraw my request. And it's like, so Picard doesn't say, get over yourself and demeanor him in any way. He merely asks questions to allow Worf the thinking process to say, all right, get your head out. You're going to do your job, And I just love that. I thought that was perfect counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then also when we talk about Kalar's death and Alexander, then I think one reason, again, that they killed her off is, going back to this being the 80s and then, early 90s, a lot of times these shows just didn't want to carry over characters and bring them back that often and such. And, or at least, if you're going to bring them back, there's a mild connection. It's not one that you feel like has to carry on through each episode. So, for example, if Worf were to marry Kalar or they had a romantic relationship, they're almost forced to, revisit that without keeping her on the ship because they're not going to pay the actress to be there all the time.
Well, she didn't have to be there all the time because she could be doing something that doesn't necessarily have to do with the bridge duties or things that Worf does, but we see her every once in a while.
Yeah, but but the way this episode ended with Alexander, she wants Worf to raise him or introduces to Alexander that Worf is his father.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the episode ends is, you will go off and be raised by my parents. And it's almost like, there they go. The writers are washing their hands of it. Yep, we got rid of Kalar, and now we're getting rid of his son, and we'll just say his son's with his parents, and we never have to go there again. Though they changed their minds later.
Right. It was interesting because I was listening to a podcast about Deep Space Nine. Yes, listeners, I'm watching Deep Space Nine. But they were pointing out like the secondary characters are more consistent and more well developed in Deep Space Nine, like Nog. Like he's not a main character, but you have these secondary characters that are consistent. So it's interesting to see the change from TNG writers that say, no, we're not going to have any consistent secondary characters. I mean, I guess the only one you could say would be Guinan and Wesley. But other than that...
Well, Wesley was a main character for most of that.
But he was on again,
he
off
was
again.
In the opening credits for the first 3-4 years.
Okay, all right. So if you consider opening credits, okay, yeah. So
but
then
Guinan,
not Wesley, but... Yeah, so the change of how the writing staff, handled these secondary characters and said, yeah, we're going to, see them much more. I think that also lends to, that idea that Deep Space Nine has these major arcs, because you're seeing these secondary characters show up where we don't get that in TNG.
And you see somebody in Deep Space Nine like like Garrick, who, if he was somebody for TNG, maybe you would have seen him for a couple episodes, but he's in like 30 plus episodes of DS9 and becomes really important. And I think it's a function of two things. I think things were starting to change a little bit in TV then. Well, DS9 was probably at the leading edge of that, but also, like, for the most part, they were kind of left alone to do what they wanted for a lot of the run, and so they kind of did. And they weren't as closely watched in some of those things, and they had people who had worked on TNG, like Ira Stephen Bear, who kind of maybe have learned some things from that. But yeah, Guinan may be the only one where you see them in more than a couple episodes, maybe Gowron a little bit. But Guinan especially, where you see her in like quite a few episodes. You know that she's there the whole time, but you're only seeing her for certain episodes. But it's fairly significant. I mean, it's more than 10% of the run.
The other thing I think they wanted to kill her off or not have the character around on a permanent basis is probably because the thought was, we already have a Klingon on the ship. We don't want two.
But where are the other Klingons?
Well, no, because think about it. Because wasn't originally when TNG was started, Roddenberry didn't want a Klingon on the bridge, and they convinced him or said it might be really good.
I don't know about some of that.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing
history. Yeah.
But anyway, the decision was then to have a Klingon, and that's why he wasn't security chief. He was kind of like second to Yar, because it was more of a later decision or something to that effect, that they weren't going to go down that route, or Roddenberry didn't want to go down that route. And then they decided, well, yeah, let's have a Klingon there and we'll put him on the bridge. And now here we are a few seasons later, and what are you going to do? Have a Klingon family now on the Enterprise? I don't know. I'm just saying there may have been a decision they didn't want to have two Klingons on the Enterprise at this point. They just wanted to focus on Worf. And they brought Alexander in, but I think that was just, wow, he's a little kid.
But I don't think if they really thought about it on that level. I think they just thought about it as, hey, it would be a great, dramatic, unexpected turn if Kalar gets killed, and it gives a reason for Worf to kill Duras and to have this confrontation with Picard and like this murky thing about Worf. I think that's all they were thinking about it in terms of. And
I think they were thinking, how can we piss Justin off?
Many years later. It's not that. No, it's. I mean, it's.
I know it doesn't.
Yeah, it's not that I'm pissed off. And I mean, again, like when I mentioned that trope of fridging, there are far, far worse examples where literally a character is just there to get killed, and Kalar is much more than that. Mm-hmm. But in the end, one of her purposes in Reunion is to get killed so that Worf can exact vengeance, and I find that disappointing that that's what happens. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, she gets reincarnated as the female Q.
Or maybe Kalar was the female Q all along, trying to experience that existence.
That's what it is.
It's all coming together now.
There could be a really cool novel that would posit that, right? It's actually the female Q. But like I think Kalar has a similar sense of humor to the female Q, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. Where she's kind of like a little sassy and sarcastic.
Uh-huh. She is.
Well, maybe that's what was happening. And she didn't die.
So my final thoughts for Kalar is that she is a fabulous character. And like you had mentioned, just plays off Worf perfectly. I love how she is so independent. She's fierce in her decisions and the choices that she makes, and she's so strong. Like, she exudes this strength and a little stubborn. So that's, I think she also is flawed. And so we get to see this complexity of this character. Again, we've only seen on 2 episodes, but has such a lasting influence, especially in Worf's life and through Alexander, that it just lives on throughout the show. And she definitely has this loving side to her that she doesn't quite know exactly what to do with. And I think that is just so brilliant, because I think so many people can relate to that, I'm fairly independent and I'm going to do what I want to do. and stuff like that. And so having those emotions, sometimes can be viewed as weak. And I think as Kalar, says, like, there's these weaknesses within me. So I think she really exudes just a commonality that so many people can relate to, that I really love Kalar and what she brings to the next generation. Bruce, what are your final thoughts?
I agree with everything that you said. And I think that is what makes the characters interesting, like Kalar and Spock. And, I was talking earlier about having the different halves and their fighting halves, but it's not about fighting one half or the other. There's always something in ourselves that we're always fighting with, it's something that we don't like about ourselves, or something that we really need to work on to improve ourselves. There's always that journey of trying to course correct certain aspects of yourself, or change things about ourselves. And that's what makes a character like Kalar so interesting. And she's the first character that we've seen in Star Trek at this point that was a half human, half Klingon. And so that was an interesting aspect. And she did make her presence really well known in that second season episode, to the point that they wanted to bring her back. And then when they killed her off, I think they remembered how well that character worked and how interesting the character worked, that when they went on to Voyager, they created another character that is half Klingon, half human, that could be a regular character on a weekly basis. So in some respects, Justin, you kind of got what you wanted in and
I love B'Elanna as a character. So yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
If it wasn't the female Q masquerading as Kalar all along.
Justin?
That's all I have.
No. Well, I mean, you guys said it very well, and I think we've talked a lot during this episode of how much we love the character of Kalar. I mean, it and as I said, I relate to it very much because my parents come from quite different backgrounds, and I won't get into it too much here, but there was actually some conflict with some of their families, and so like I think the mark of a really great character who you only see a little bit is that you want to see more. I want to find out what she was like with Worf when he was at the academy, or whenever things happen. I want to find out what her childhood was like, what her father was like, what her mother was like, and I think that she's a great character also because she really pushes Worf. She is someone like who is like fierce and has determination and can stand up to Worf, but at the same time kind of poke fun at him and try to push him. And I just find that whole side of her just like really delightful. So like whenever I see the character, it's like, oh, it's Kalar. I love her because she's strong. And she's also someone who is funny and, seems like a well-rounded person, really trying to integrate these things about herself. So I think it's a fantastic character all around. And yeah, like you said, Bruce, it is a bit of the template for B'Elanna Torres. So I'm glad we got kind of more of that. And I think these cases where you have a character who's half human and half another species, whether it's Spock being Vulcan or Troy being, Betazoid or something like that, is always just really interesting to see like how they handle those two sides and how they integrate it and what happens. So yeah, I enjoyed very much talking about it. I think on Earl Grey we've talked about Kalar in bits here and there, but it's great to devote a whole episode to her.
Yes. Bruce, thank you so much for coming on Earl Grey. And again, this amazing topic that we got to discuss for an hour. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, this has been a very enjoyable cup of Earl Grey for me. It's get me all warm and cozy because it's nice hot tea.
Yes. Awesome. Well, we will have to have you on again for sure.
Promise?
Promises.
It's a promise. It's
okay,
a promise.
Cool.
And we'll see you at STLV for sure.
Yay, thanks. Good seeing you guys.
Yeah. So, Bruce, where can people find you out there on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. And you can find me in the Babel Conference, of course. And you mentioned earlier, Literary Treks with Dan Gunther talking about the Star Trek books and comics here on Trek FM. And also do a podcast called The Star Wars Report talking about Star Wars, of course. So that's where you'll find me.
Well, listeners, next week we are going to talk about our favorite character moments from season 6. So if you want to start watching some of your favorite episodes from season 6, go ahead and be thinking about what are some of your character moments too. It's been so much fun talking about Kalar, but that isn't the only thing we've been talking about here on the network. Here's what you might have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm. To the journey!
Do you have to have the stick to be the grand proxy?
The scepter?
Yeah. I see it as a walking stick.
Yes. Is that supposed to be the Grand Negus's scepter? Like, is that the actual one?
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
replica, of course, but is it supposed to be the actual one?
I don't know, but what it reminds me of totally is old Biff from Back to the Future, old Biff, with his cane that he hits people on the head with. That is totally it.
Hello! McFly!
Think, McFly, think.
Standard orbit.
People are coming over and they're introducing people to him, and it's my turn. And he goes, Steve, Jimmy, I want you to meet the host of the convention. This is Stephen Last. And he goes, pleased to meet you, sir. Nice to meet you, Mr. Doohan. And he goes, hi, Steve. Nice to meet you. And he's like, what? What? You mean you don't talk like that?
The 602 Club.
In particular, I noticed that the most with either Elastigirl or Violet, because it's sort of like you and I were talking about before the show, Helen, Elastigirl, really shows that she's Elastigirl not only in what she does as a superhero, but in showing the things that a regular mom has to deal with, whether you're a single mom or, a big family. It's something that traditionally they're trying to show that a parent goes through.
Warp 5.
Right, because Frankenstein himself, it doesn't really mistreat the monster, right? They've got him locked up, chained up and whatnot, right? Because they don't know what to do with him, I guess. Like, now that I've made this corpse, well, now what, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a puppy.
Never
right?
thinking about the end game. Just like all those, master villains. It's like, yeah, you rule the world, and then what?
Right.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. That helps others to find the show.
If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Earl Grey. That will come right to us, and we might read your email just like we did on today's show. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Justin, where can people contact you when you're not trying out Worf's calisthenics program?
It's really a tough program, Amy. While you were doing that last little bit, I actually went into the holodeck. I have something that can stop time, so I can do that. And man, even level 1 is tough. I just barely survived.
Yeah, and then have Worf come in and say, level 2.
Yeah. So anyway, when I'm not doing that, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at TrekFan4747, where I tweet about nothing but Star Trek. Yes, I am still tweeting out my Season 5 rewatch, but I will get to it soon. I'm just doing it little by little because I've been kind of busy, but I do still do it and talk about lots of other Star Trek stuff. And you can also find me hanging around the Babel Conference on Facebook. So, Amy, where can people contact you when you're not performing your duties as an ambassador and special emissary for the Federation?
Well, you can find me here on the network. I do a little show called The Edge, which is Trek FM's podcast to Star Trek Discovery. I do that with Okay. I do that with Patrick Devlin. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, where Justin, you have inspired me. And I am tweeting my DS9 watch, and I am currently in season 2.
That's been a lot of fun. Guys, if you aren't already following Amy on Twitter, you should. Because it's Amy and because she has lots of great stuff to say, but she is doing a DS9 rewatch. As you guys know, it's my favorite series, even though, of course, I love TNG. And you're making it through quickly if you're in season 2 already.
Well, as a school teacher, I have my summers off, so I've got a lot more free time where it's like, oh, I'll watch an episode while I'm eating breakfast, and oh, I'll watch an episode while I'm eating lunch, you know?
That's great.
So it's going through quickly.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk with you about that sometime in the future, maybe on a Patreon exclusive.
Absolutely. So that's where you can find me. Oh, also on the Babel Conference. That's my favorite place. I just love it there.
If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/trekfm. That's patreon.com/trekfm to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more, available through our special patrons website, the Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/trekfm.
We'd like to take this opportunity and recognize our current associate producers, Norman Lau, Justin Ozer, Michael Huter, and Thomas Appel. Thank you so much for supporting Trek FM and Earl Grey. So join us next time for another cup of Earl Grey.
Whoever said getting there was half the fun never rode in a Class 8 probe.
Sorry, had to make myself beautiful.